brothers. In fact, they were so big that they were 11 and 15 when I was born. And so when I think of a big brother, I literally think of big brothers. And when I think about my childhood and my big brothers and how little I was, because contrary to what I look like now, I was really tiny when I was little. So much so that all the kids at school thought I was in kindergarten even when I was in the 5th grade, and I hated it. So when I think about being little and my big brothers and how small I was, the first thing that comes to mind is Shoeshine Boy. Anybody remember the good old cartoon, Underdog? And Shoeshine Boy, the tiny little Shoeshine Boy. And what would happen when there was trouble in the neighborhood? Shoeshine Boy would become Underdog. Say it with me. Have no fear, Underdog is here. Look, up in the sky, it's a plane, it's a bird, it's a frog. A frog, not plane, nor bird, nor even frog, it's just little old me. As he runs into the building. Underdog. I loved Underdog. One of my favorite cartoons when I was a kid because, like Nan was teaching the children, I was the underdog. I was smaller than everybody. I was, believe it or not, quieter than everybody. Some things do change. Very shy. I had these 2 big older brothers who were stronger than me. They could beat me at every game. They could hold me down. I had no chance whatsoever. I could never win. I was the underdog. Well, as Nan said about the Bible, there are underdogs all over the Bible, and it starts with Abraham, who's an underdog because his wife Sarah is barren. That's a whole other story, but she finally has children. But that's not until after he has to have an experiment with her maid and have a child that causes more friction in the family. So you got an underdog there. Plus God's got him moving all over the place. Every time he gets settled, God picks him up and moves him somewhere else. You know how it is when you're the new kid in town, right? I mean, Abraham was the new kid in town like 3 times in a row. Like every time he got where he was settled down and good, God would pick him up, be like his parents picking him up and moving him somewhere else. Underdog, Abraham. Isaac, also an underdog. You noticed he was 40 years old. My hair's blowing like crazy. He was 40 years old, Isaac was. He and Rebecca. Now, I know people are having children later now in life than they used to, but 40? I mean, can you imagine? Think about back then. You know, you got your whole life plan. You're going to get married. You're going to have a family. You're going to, have your business. You're going to get all these things you want. He's 40 years old, and his wife hasn't even been able to be pregnant, much less have a child. Neither Isaac nor Rebecca have what they want. And so Isaac begins praying. And he begins praying. And he prays, and he prays, and he prays. And do you remember how old the Bible said he was when the twins were born? 60. So how long did Isaac pray? Huh? Yes, you guys do math well. That's good. 20 years from the time that he was 40 until the time that he was, I guess, 59. So maybe technically 19 years till she got pregnant. And 20 years until the children were born. But then, even when she gets pregnant, lo and behold, what should happen? But it's a difficult pregnancy, right? She is in pain. I don't know what this is like. I admit it up front. I've not born children, but those of you who have, I suspect being pregnant with one child is enough all by itself. Add two that are butting heads in the womb. Not just one baby kicking, but 2. And not just kicking mama, but kicking each other and kicking mama. That's a lot of struggle. I imagine there was a lot of fear going on in Isaac and Rebecca waiting for these 2 babies to be born. You know, if I'm Isaac, I'm thinking, dude, I can't win for losing. I mean, here I am, 60 years old, about to have my first kid, And I'm going to have two at once, and they've been nothing but trouble from the time that they were conceived. It's a stark reminder to us that faith is always one generation from being extinct. And that the passing on of the faith from one generation to the next is always precarious. I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I think that's what the writers of the Hebrew Bible are trying to tell us by all these underdogs. You got this one guy, Abraham, and he almost dies before he has any kids that are his own kids, even though God has promised. It's looking bleak. And if you remember Abraham, his story, he's actually called to sacrifice his son Isaac by God. I mean, the faith is still hanging in the balance. It might not get passed on to the next generation, but thankfully something happens and Isaac is spared, and now Isaac gets married, and now faith is hanging in the balance again. No kids for Isaac, no kids for Isaac, no kids for Isaac, no kids for Isaac, until he's 60. And then he gets these kids, and they're nothing but trouble. Faith is hanging in the balance. Passing it on from one generation to the next is always precarious. The children struggle with one another inside of her. We actually have a visual of them outside of her, but this will give us an idea of what those children look like. Melissa is going to put up a picture there of our children, Esau and Jacob. One is strong, one is weak. The younger will dominate the older. Two nations, two peoples, two cultures, two sets of values. And what we're told with this is that the status quo of the day is going to be in jeopardy. This birth is going to be the sign of a new order. The old order is going to be overturned, because in the old order, the oldest always rules over the youngest. The oldest is always the strongest. But we are told when God speaks to Rebekah that this law, it's called the law of primogeniture, the law of the firstborn, that's going to be inverted. The second son is going to rule over the first. And we get this incredible description of Esau and Jacob. Esau is a hunter, an outdoorsman. We're told, if you keep on reading that text, that Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So Esau's daddy's boy, and he's hairy. And that implication of him being covered in a hairy mantle, the implication is that he has physical strength, that he is strong. He is the firstborn, and in that law, the law of primogeniture, he will inherit the land, and he will inherit the power of the family, and he will inherit respect. In a word, Esau is privileged. He's got advantages from the get-go that Jacob never had, just by virtue of being born first. He is the fortunate son. Jacob, quiet, indoors. Instead of a daddy's boy, he is... Oh, y'all are awake. Yeah, Jacob is a mama's boy. He's a second son. He's going to have limited resources in life. Given that he's quiet and indoors, the implication is that he is an atypical man for his culture. He is different. And in a word, Jacob is underprivileged from the get-go. He does not have the advantages that Esau had. He is the unfortunate son. Now, they've got their hands on each other's faces. I couldn't find a good picture of the heel, but he is the unfortunate son. Jacob is the unfortunate son by a heel. They're not just brothers, they're twins. They're born so close together that Jacob is grasping Esau's heel. Now, whether or not you believe in this literally doesn't matter to me. It's the imagery that matters. How much closer can you get to being born at the same time? How much closer can you get to being firstborn than having your hand on the firstborn's foot? Okay, this is horse country, right? What do we say when there's two horses crossing the finish line and one of them comes in first and one of them comes in second? The one who comes in first comes in by a nose. In this case, it would be a nose hair. It's that close. It's that close. I think the author tells us to illustrate the absurdity of the law of primogeniture, that they could be that close. And think about it, with these two caricatures that we've just put out there. What does Esau look like in your mind? Is Esau big or small? He's big. We're never told, but what is the implication? He is big. Is he strong or weak? Is he hot-tempered or cool-headed? Hot-tempered. How about Jacob? Big or small? Strong or weak? Hot-tempered or cool-headed? Cool-headed. Who's more likely to be the bully, Esau or Jacob? Esau. Who's more likely to be the victim, Esau or Jacob? Now, keep in mind that all of these are implications. We're never told Esau is a bully. We're never told that he's necessarily bigger than Jacob. The problem the author is telling us with this grasping of the heel, the problem is not Esau. The problem is the system, the family system, the cultural system, the law of primogeniture, the favoritism of Isaac and Rebekah. Jacob simply has the poor fortune of being born second by seconds. By literally seconds. The grasping of the heel of these two sons born almost simultaneously further illustrates that there should be no favoritism here. There should be no disadvantage here. They are twins. They are twins. But one has a place at the table in life because he's born first. And the other will grasp for a place at the table his entire life. Remember, God says these aren't just two brothers, these are two peoples, two nations, two cultures, one with a place at the table, and one always grasping for a place at the table. One born with blessing, and the other who can only get the blessing by grasping. Think about it. Think about your own family system. What was your role in the system? Where were you born into the system? Were you the baby and only girl like me and felt like the underdog? Were you the big brother or big sister? Were you the middle child? Were you the only child? Which has complications of its own by the very fact that there is no big brother or little sister to blame. What role were you born into in your family? What role are you born into in our society and in our world? And what role do you find yourself grasping for? To me, the story of Jacob's big brother Esau having all these advantages and Jacob being disadvantaged. The problem is not Esau, the problem is the system. And the question is, for people of faith, is how do we manage when the system is against us from the get-go? Remember Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob is the God of the Hebrew peoples. The Hebrew peoples who were always the underdog in society, always being conquered by somebody else's army, always their land being invaded by some other culture. How do you manage when the system and the culture is against you from the get-go? God is saying your weakness is what can make you strong. I think this is something that firstborn sons and daughters, be they actual firstborn sons and daughters in your own family, or those of us like Americans who are firstborn sons and daughters in terms of the world order, it's hard to understand what it must be like for the Jacobs of the world. I think if you are the favored child, it's almost impossible to understand what life is like for the unfavored child. You know, second sons and daughters don't have a choice. I mean, Jacob did the best he could. He grasped. But he was still sad. I mean, he couldn't help it. But you know, firstborn sons and daughters don't have a choice either. Right? And I think that's important for us to think about, again, as we are firstborn sons and daughters in our world and in our culture, most of us being upper middle or upper middle class. It's the lot in life of the firstborns just like it is the secondborns. I think both Esau and Jacob are just dealing with their lot in life. They're just playing their roles in the system. And again, that's the problem. The problem is the system. It's a terrible system. And we all live in it. But the good news for people of faith, both those who are secondborn as well as those who are firstborn, is that God can change the system. God can change the system. When we are weak, God is strong. Jacob is the primeval ancestor of the downtrodden and the weak. Jacob is the promise that our weakness in life, no matter what it is, can become our greatest strength. And let's face it, even firstborns have their weakness. And believe it or not, God took care of Esau too, just in different ways. That's another story for another sermon another time. But if you ever find yourself in Jacob's place, being the underdog, being the underprivileged, being the underrepresented, the story of Jacob says, no matter how skewed the system is, you can bear it. You can even turn it in your favor. You can trick the privileged out of their privilege. We didn't read this part, but the rest of the lectionary story, and you've probably heard it, is that Jacob tricks Esau out of his birthright. Even though he's the unfavored one, even though he's the one that's not supposed to get the blessing, he still gets the blessing. And we're going to hear more about that blessing and how it plays out in Jacob's life over the next couple of weeks. The good news of faith is that God delivers second sons. Because God gives second sons the ability to grasp the blessing. This is actually something that we experienced at General Assembly this week, where I was last Sunday in Indianapolis for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We saw Teresa Ford Owens, the very first African American elected to the office of General Minister and President of the Disciples of Christ in the United States. And I was on my feet. We were on our feet. We were shouting and cheering and singing. The first African American and the second woman to lead a mainline Protestant denomination in the United States. Hear that, ladies and gentlemen. The Christian Church Disciples of Christ has elected the first ever African American president of a mainline denomination in the United States. We beat the Methodists, we beat the Presbyterians, we beat the Baptists, we beat the Assemblies of God, we beat. We're the underdog. We're one of the smallest mainline Protestant congregations, and we won! Because I'll tell you what, we are asking ourselves, what kind of system do we want to see in our churches and in our culture? And we, my friends, are ready to lift up the second sons and daughters of our society who have been pushed down for far too long. I am so excited. I cannot tell you. We have got amazing leadership from white males, from white females, from black males and black females, and Hispanic males and Hispanic females, and Asian males and Asian females. We have a very multicultural denomination with gifted leadership. The tide is turning, and we are leading the turn. Amen? standing in the great line of faith of people like the Apostle Paul. Melissa has for us a scripture from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians that I wanted to remind you of as we embark on this series. Paul talks about being given a thorn in the flesh. You all remember this? Paul says, "To keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me. But the Lord said, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness.'" So Paul says, "I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me." It is our weakness that makes us strong. It is Jacob's weakness that made him strong. It is our weakness as disciples of Christ that is making us strong. Like the old spiritual of old that African American slaves sang, especially during the Civil War, we are all just climbing Jacob's ladder. Y'all know that one? We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Children of the cross. Every round goes higher and higher. Children, do you want your freedom? Children, do you want your freedom? We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is rooting for the underdogs of the world.